Hello everyone, I'm Erica and welcome back to my channel. This is going to be the first vintage pattern that I tackle, and it's going to be a relatively easy one, I think, but I'm going to be doing this vintage 1950s apron. So the thing is, I already want to change the pattern a little bit. So there's a few different views and you can mix and match, obviously, but I'm gonna do this one with the hearts. However, I love the double scallop look. The problem is I don't want to use that much fabric because this is a lot of fabric in there. So I'm probably gonna see if I can figure out how to just add a double scallop on the bottom without actually cutting out a whole nother layer of fabric. And I also don't want it as heavy as it would be with another layer of fabric. So that is my plan. That's what I'm going to see if I can do. For this, I am aware that currently it is March when this video goes up. It probably will be April, or later, I don't know at this point. However, we're going to lean full bore into Valentine's Day aesthetic because I found this fabric, I think it was the week after Valentine's Day, and it was just, I had been to the thrift store a couple of times that week looking for a particular thing and not found it, and I almost didn't go back to the section where they usually put fabric because I had literally just been there a couple of days before, but I did, and I'm so glad I did because I found this. And I've had this red cotton polka dot in my stash for quite some time. I got this back in 2020 when I was making masks in mass for some people and medical people that had asked for them from me, and I ended up having a lot of this left over because if I was going to make masks, they were going to be pretty or cute. As pretty as you can make a mask. Anyway, regardless, I have a lot left over and I think they pair quite nicely together. So my plan is to do the main apron out of this, and yes, I also realize that this is a white base fabric for an apron. However, I don't care. It may show stuff, but that's what an apron's for, in my opinion. So this is going to be for the ruffles, the trim, the belts, the ruffles around the pocket. I also am not sure whether or not I want to do 2 heart pockets or not, and I think based off of what I'm seeing of the pattern piece that I'm probably going to want to make this top portion bigger, a little bit bigger. And I know that the goal is for it to look more like a heart going down, but I want more coverage there than what this pattern piece has. So it's here and you cut it on the fold, and I just don't feel like that's going to be enough for actual like protecting your clothes. I'm going to play with it. I'm going to see, and we'll see. This is supposed to be quick, but the yellow and blue flower dress was supposed to be quick, and while it technically was quick in that it only took me a day total in hours, it took me a full week in practice because of interruptions. So, gonna get to it. Okay, so most of the apron is cut out. I have the skirt of the apron here, and then I still did want to do the double layer ruffle, but I really didn't have enough fabric, and I want enough of this left over for one more project that I have in mind. So I was trying to conserve a little bit. So for the bottom, also, I just don't feel like you need that much fabric for an apron, because the way the pattern had it was 2 of these and then 2 of the bigger ones. So that would have been just a lot. So I'm cut out this ruffle just as a strip, and I'm going to do the scalloped edge is what I'm trying to say. Then I'm going to do the ruffle obviously on the bottom of each, and I will just attach this one up under that one, and it'll give the look without having all of the extra fabric. So that is that. I did cut out 2 pockets because I want 2. We have the neckband, the tie, and the waistband. And then I left the pattern piece here because I wanted to show you that this is what I was talking about, where I wanted a little bit more coverage here. So the only thing I have not cut out is all of the fabric for the actual ruffle bits. And I'm not sure how much of that I will need yet. What I'm thinking I will do is cut a whole bunch of this on a bias and then fold it in half. And I haven't determined how big I want it, although this width here does seem pretty decent. Might be a little bit less, and then ruffle it up that way all the way around. But cutting it on the bias will allow it to go a little bit more easily, I feel like, around these scallops without being a problem. So I'm going to go ahead and, for one, I've got to go press all of this a little bit better, and then we'll see what's next. But I will wait on cutting out the rest of this until I'm closer to that point. Okay, so joke's on me, never mind. Putting that ruffle on is literally the first step. So I'm gonna go cut up a whole bunch of strips now. I think obviously they're showing lace or something there, but I'm just gonna use the polka dot. So let's get to cutting then. Okay, so began the long process of sewing all of these bias strips together and then ironing out those little seams. Then I folded it in half lengthwise and ran 2 rows of gathering stitches along the top. Now, I ended up tearing out that bottom row of gathering stitches after I had sewed it onto the apron because it was showing on the other side. Yeah, there was a lot here. And also, I didn't sew all of them into one long strip because that was absolutely ridiculous. I did it in smaller strips and then pieced them together throughout the process. So, like, it took about 4 of my strips to go around the bottom edge of each of the scalloped edges of the apron because, again, it was such a long strip. I didn't want to risk threads breaking during the gathering process. So obviously I lined both heart pockets in these gathered bias strips and the top portion and then the bottom edges of the scallops. And this by far took the longest out of the entire project. I showed it here, but I did top stitch around the edges of the everything once I turned the ruffles right side out, just because it needed those top stitching rows to hold it flat. And then I ironed some interfacing on the inside of the pockets. For the top portion, once the ruffle was sewn on, I took a lining piece and sewn it on, clipped the curves and down into the point of the top of the heart, and then flipped it right side once it was sewn, and again top stitched it around. Like I said a minute ago, this was just an insanely long process of putting the ruffle on the bottom row of the scallops of both the top portion of the apron and the bottom portion. And then again with lining pieces that were just white cotton this time, I put them on the backs, Sewed the lining to it with the wrong sides together with the ruffle inside, and then clipped and clipped and clipped and turned it right side out and top stitched it all the way around both the top of the apron scallops and the bottom. This took a while. This is just laid out how it's going to be. I've got to still finish this top edge on the under ruffle here, and then figure out how I want to stitch it to the top. I did put some interfacing on the back of the pockets because this heart fabric was really light, and so that's fine. I just wanted it to be a little bit heftier. But I am very glad that I only did the ruffle here and not a whole second apron piece. But just laying it out, and then, you know, here's going to be the top. It is going to be so cute. I'm so excited about it. But I have to put it away for right now because I have to go do some baking and some cooking. So it's going to have to pause. But yes, oh my gosh, it's so cute. To finish the top edge of the bottom scallop piece, I just used some bias tape that I made a while ago, and you can see I tried a couple of different. I was initially just gonna sandwich it in there and sew it down, and I decided not to do that. So I evened off the edge is there, and then with one edge up against of the right sides together with the bias tape, I sewed it down along the fold line, trimmed down the seam, and then turned it over and stitched it again. And that worked really well. Then to sew the two layers together, I just pinned along the bottom and then sewed along the edge of the top scallops to sew that bottom layer on right over the top stitching I had done earlier. Then I sewed on the pockets. To begin the assembly of the rest of the apron, I clipped the curves there as I'm showing after I did a row of stay stitching, and then with wrong sides together, I pinned the top to the bottom, and then still with wrong sides for the top and the apron piece, but then the right side of the waistband, I pinned that all the way to the edge. And I hope I do a good job of explaining this as it goes, but once that was pinned, I stitched that down and then started the tie process. This was a little interesting in the construction. The next step was to get all of the edges of the ties hemmed, so I just did a turn and turn with a very narrow hem down both the long edges and then the tip where it gets pointed out that I show there on the left.
And then once that was all sewn down on both ties, pleated up, or no, gathered up the raw edge of the end, and then that's going to go inside the waistband. Then I ironed up the waistband that I sewed on a minute ago, which was a little tricky, and then just showing my finished edges there. I did the gathering that I mentioned a second ago and pinned it to 1/2 of the waistband with wrong side to right side. This is also confusing, and I don't know if I'm doing a good job at explaining it. And then the raw edge of the waistband there was already ironed, pressed under, preparing it for finishing that edge. And so then it's folded like that with the two edges pressed up and stitched down on the ends with the waist tie sandwiched in between. And once it's all turned right side out, it lays flat, and then the waistband is turned to the front of the apron, and then that is top stitched down. And it was the weirdest waistband construction I had ever done, but it worked and it looked really good when it was done. And I don't know that I did a good job of explaining it, but it did work. Then the last bit was the necktie, and I just took a long piece, folded it in half, sewed that one end together, sewed it down the long straight edge, turned it right side out after I clipped the corner at that end I sewed, pressed it down, sewed that, folded up that unfinished edge, sewed it so that it was inside the apron, and then sewed it down to the apron on the outside. For turning the necktie right side out, I used my fast turn kit, which I'm not going to lie, I was excited to have a reason to use it. This was a purely unnecessary thing that I asked my husband to get me for Christmas last year. That is a sewing tool that I went without for many years and did just fine, but I really wanted these. It's a complete extra, but like I said, I asked for them for Christmas and I don't regret it. I've used them a couple of times, but I always love having a reason to pull them out, and it worked quite well for the neck band here.
Okay, wrap up time. The short and thick of it is, I love it. It is adorable. It is absolutely what I had pictured in my head when I saw the fabric. I love it. A couple of things to note. The way they did the waistband I thought was very, very interesting, and it's fine. I don't know that I would do it differently again. I will say for the top strap though, I really wish that that had been incorporated into the seam, so it wasn't sewn on at the very end. So if I make this pattern again or any other variation of this pattern, I'm going to go ahead and do the strap first and sew it in before I actually sew the front and back together. That way when I turn it right side out, these just are in the actual seam itself. Because I don't love that on the back. It's fine. You can't really see the square box stitching to stitch it in very well, but it's just, I don't love it. Other than that, I'm very pleased with how the double ruffle turned out. One thing I'm not sure about is, so I think I said it, but I used the top stitching line of the bottom of each ruffle to actually sew on this second portion. So when you go to the back side, there's this little gapy pocket on each ruffle. And I don't know if that'll be a problem or not. I'm totally fine with going in and just doing a few hand whip stitches at each point, but the stitching goes up in a point almost to the edge of it at the top part of each scallop. So it's not going to come off. What I'm not sure about is wearing it is if these little mini pockets are going to be a problem. But other than that, you know, there are a couple of places that I messed up on, like the tip of this heart, and here I didn't quite get, it'll show it to the edge like it is on this side, so that's like a perfect line up there. But these are very minor things. I do not regret adding interfacing to the top part and to the pockets. This was just a pretty flimsy fabric, and I think that that gives it the stability it needs. But yeah, it's adorable, and I'm gonna start using it immediately. And my daughter wants one, so I'll probably be making a second one. So this was fun. This was a really wonderfully fun adventure to dive into the vintage patterns. So I can't wait to dive into the rest of them. I think this is the only simplicity one though. I think. I don't have the other ones with me in easy grab right now. I think the other ones are Butterick and Vogue, but the instructions were pretty simple to follow, and yeah, it's adorable. I don't really have much else to say. So thank you for joining me for this fun, and I hope that you stick around for any future. There will be a lot. It's late now because I was going to be working on this all day, but my husband and I went thrift store hopping in a city not ours, but close to ours today, and I found quite a handful of patterns that I'm pretty excited to try. So I'm not sure if a couple of those aren't going to jump in front of a couple of the others, but we'll see. So this was fun, and thanks for joining me. I'd love to hear what you think, what you're working on. Feel free to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.
I thought I would throw in a little extra footage of me actually using it in the kitchen. We went on a vacation week with my in-laws that took us somewhere for spring break, and I was doing a lot of baking to prepare for the trip because with a family of 7 and then add my 2 in-laws to it, that's a lot of food. and it's a lot cheaper to just take it to the vacation house. And this is what it looked like to have one breakfast of cinnamon rolls for 9 people. But anyway, I am using the Apron and I still love it.